In a word, I should say it's been the poetry of the North American child for a century and more. This is not necessarily true in Europe. The relation which the European child has to similar toys and so on is different. He has another, perhaps, area of recognized art and poetry that is not quite the same as technology. On the other hand, when a European comes to this continent, he is quite delighted with our whole America's Disneyland. An adult tends to approach the technological world too visually to get its poetry. The child enjoys it through all his synesthetic. Any situation that you enjoy by deep involvement with all your faculties and all your powers becomes a poetic situation. The child who likes to lie down and put his eye at the track level, this is stepping up the degree of involvement and participation in the activity. The worm's eye view is, from any cameraman's point of view, the most involving. The train to the child is a poetic world, of course, that it's like some reconstructed monster from some distant age. It's utterly quaint. It's like westerns on TV. It's a remote and historic world. Now, this is a world, by the way, in which children feel a far more commitment than adults. Practically minded people have very little involvement in technology. Children with their deep involvement feel a real passion about older technology and older things. We're moving into a time when the reconstruction of ancient technologies, well, you know, the cult of the early motor cars, is a passion because it permits a kind of involvement in the human community and in the human past of experience that is altogether fascinating for many people. Total involvement.
It's striking that the children working with materials of this sort are giving themselves their own. Their curiosity is exercised. They are looking for the answers to things, and when they find it, that's their reward. They don't need gold stars or approbation. They should get these in some sort of a long-run thing. They also sense, as they move along, an increase in their own competence. And this is pretty heady. This is what keeps one moving. This is one of the basic ways in which you have to fight what I want to call the sort of middle dropout, the kid who drops out of sheer boredom because he's never had a decent intellectual experience in the classroom. And they're getting an intellectual experience.
We're in the laboratory in a double sense. We're trying to import the laboratory into the classroom, and we ourselves are regarding the classroom as a laboratory. I would say the pendulum is one of the classic examples of a system which requires a knowledge of all the laws of physics before you understand it adequately. We're just beginning to probe with this particular piece of equipment. The study of the properties of the pendulum is very close to the beginnings of the fundamental ideas of modern physics. And one sees here, first of all, a certain style of work, a certain attack on the part of the child, which we think is very important, that he be at this stage quite free to design his own way or to develop his own way of going into the subject. The pendulum itself has remarkable properties which go on the trees to the, as one child said, the tail of a dog.
I think that the important thing to bear in mind here is not only that they're learning some physics, and I'm not going to go into that, but that the kind of learning that they're doing now is of a kind that they can use, that they're getting it in a way that'll stick to their bones, if you will. They're taking observations, they're introducing to the observations some way of regularizing them, groping for their own way of stating the lawfulness of phenomena that they observe. We're trying to give them some sense of physics such that they can become their own physicists rather than being mere spectators. And this is what the nature of the learning is that's taking place. The great simplifications tend to be quite abstract. Getting some sense of the simplicities of nature, some of these grand simplicities, is precisely something that takes a while. And indeed, if anything is worth taking a while at, it is this. You cannot give them this sense of the simplicity of phenomena simply by saying how it goes. You've got to let them go through these exercises.
Oppenheimer is fond of saying, there are children here in the street who could solve some of my toughest physics problems because they have modes of perception which I have lost. The playground approach to physics or any other learning process is really from the old curriculum of classified subjects and fragmented data, well processed, neatly packaged, a changeover into the world of discovery and of participation in the act of discovery, which is a producer orientation rather than a consumer orientation. I think this big watershed is occurring as a result of speed up of data.
Marking is underway now so that no matter what else happens, we've got this.
The great thing about making a film loop in a cartridge is that you make it available even to the clumsiest people to put right into a machine and run off and look at again and again and again.
My feeling after showing a similar class some loops about the pendulum and feeling their reaction to seeing this film after they had been working for several weeks in the classroom with very similar equipment, my feeling was this was a very dramatic experience for the kids to see from the adult world a slightly more elegant presentation of the very material that they had been working with themselves. And they saw everything in these films. Whereas if you showed these films to children who'd never played with the pendulum, never done these kinds of experiments and so on, I think they would get almost no information and very little of pedagogical value from them. So I think the film has to be linked closely with the work.
But the great thing about the technology is that it can produce, or provide, let me say, it can provide experience which the child cannot have with the naked eye.
9 times 8 is 72. Another 36. 9 times 4 is 36. 72. 8 times 9 is 72. 40. 8 times 5 is 40. 32. 8 times 4 is 32. 6 times 5 is 35. 40. 8 times 6 is 49.
The 8mm loop film to me, which seems to be termed a concept film, the beauty of it to me, the fact that it is a single concept and it's within the range of each individual child and provides the opportunity for the child to go through it several times, and that it's uncluttered with the audio without any other influences, so that the child can concentrate entirely on what he's seeing, and it's training him in observation, I feel. One of the children mentioned to me that this allows them to be individualists. This way they can observe without word or sound, and they can interpret it for themselves in several ways. And this is something else that I particularly appreciate about the concept films. They do lend themselves to a variety of interpretations. But I think they should be very available, that is, within each room, so that they can take them as they need them.
The very technologies we've been seeing in the classrooms speed up data to a speed where the independent and unrelated facts are unimportant compared to the patterns between facts. So we move from a world of mechanically classified and processed data into a world of pattern recognition and discovery.
Lowercase. 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 Lowercase.
Then,
Can go fast.
this
This animal
animal
goes fast, and this runs fast.
jumps.
Do you know
No,
the animal of this
of this
animal
animal.
can go fast?
The children you are seeing, the children right here, are range in tested ability from normal through gifted. Now in our program taken as a whole, we have children who range in tested ability from the educable retardate through the gifted child. In terms of social background, the children you're seeing are favored in terms of the cultural background of the families from which they come. So you're seeing somewhat superior children. The children learn in the same general way, I think, that they learn to speak their own native language. That is, they learn inductively as opposed to being taught. There is a very close correspondence between the written and spoken forms of English and most other natural languages that have a written form. And it's a matter of making the proper transformations to go from the spoken form to the written form and back. In the various parts of the laboratory program, they're making these interconnections between the spoken and written form of the language. But the set of methods permit a great variety of approaches to the same basic situation. What, in perhaps the deepest sense of the word, comes naturally.
Indian buffalo hunt. Long ago, buffalo lived in the flatlands of the West. These flat lands are called plains. Plains. Hundreds of buffaloes lived on the plains in great herds. The plains were fine hunting grounds for the Indians. Golden Feather was a chief of the Plains Indians.
There's a C in front of the H.
Chief of the Plains Indians. He had a son named Silver Feather. It was time for Silver Feather to go on his first buffalo hunt.
It's a peculiar situation that we are encountering a more inclusive kinds of technologies which involve more of the human being in the learning process, and we're confronted with a great many people of exclusive and departmentalized and specialist skills and attitudes toward learning who are not very friendly toward integral forms of learning. Any specialist is going to see to it that his specialty is protected against any invasion from any quarter. And so fragmented people are great experts in sensing threats from more integrated forms of learning. they've got a very good thing. They've taken a long time to acquire this specialist skill, and they don't see why they should yield 1 inch to people with different methods.
O. Lowercase. B. D. R. Space.
O-V-E-R. Over.
Okay, Moore's approach brings the whole method of teaching phonetic literacy, or teaching literacy, closer to the actual norms of learning speech itself, the spoken word, by involvement of the whole sensorium of sight and sound and movement, and the involvement of the whole being. So it's not surprising that people would accept this as a more congenial form of learning, and certainly one much closer to the nature of language itself than that of the older forms of literacy.
Y. S. I. D. E. Hyphen. Hyphen. Space.
C-O-U-N-T-R-Y-S-I-D-E. Countryside.
I think in addition to whatever they learn in the sense of academic skills, that they acquiring a sense of independence, they can take problems without waiting for somebody to provide a solution.
Haiku.
What does haiku mean, Tammy?
Haiku is Japanese poetry. Ivy on a wall, like wee little animals climbing to their homes.
This kind of method would enable people of so-called slow and retarded characteristics to perform quite well. It also enables people of ordinary characteristics to perform very much better. So it raises the accelerates the general rate of intake and of learning and perception and grasp for all kinds of people. But by the simple, by bringing the learning situation closer to the situation in which we learn to speak in the first place, involving all of us. People would never learn to speak at all if all the senses weren't richly involved.
Big dogs and little dogs. Black and white dogs. Hello, hello. Do you like my hat? No, I do not like your hat. Goodbye, goodbye.
¿De parte de quién? Un momento, voy a llamarlo. Un momento, voy a llamarlo. 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 Un momento, voy a llamarlo. Un momento, voy a llamarlo. Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
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 Voy a llamarlo.
Voy a llamarlo.
Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
Voy a llamarlo.
Voy a llamarlo.
Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
Un momento, voy a llamarlo.
Libros cerrados. Vamos a repasar esas frases. Repitan.
Diga,
Diga.
diga,
Diga.
2. ¿Está en casa Antonio?
Está en casa Antonio.
¿Está en casa Antonio?
Está en casa Antonio.
5. Vicente Ríos, amigo suyo.
Vicente Ríos, amigo suyo.
7.
un momento, voy a llamarlo.
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 8.
Clase para mañana. Aprenden al teléfono 1 hasta 7 y escriban número 48. Hasta mañana, clase. Hasta mañana.
Surveillez vos sons et votre articulation. Attention.
Attention.
Articulation.
Articulation. J'ai faim à la fin. Enfin, voici une dame.
Le chien de Valentin a mordu le sacristain Émilien.
Le chien de Valentin a mordu le sacristain Émilien.
Le médecin de Saint-Justin est canadien. Il n'a que 25 ans.
Le médecin de Saint-Justin
histories?
est canadien.
Historiette.
C'est que tu
Des
Saint-Justin.
Historiettes qui sont loisirs.
Arias ne se trouble point.
Arias ne se trouble point.
Prend feu au contraire.
Il reprenait le fil de sa narration.
Il reprenait le fil de sa narration avec plus de confiance qu'il ne l'avait commencé.
Il reprenait le fil de sa narration avec plus de confiance qu'il ne l'avait commencé.
Huile.
Huile.
Mettez bien les organes intérieurs, la langue, tout ça, pour prononcer comme pour prononcer le U. Et là, vous dites rapidement après la voyelle I. Alors ça fait huile, huile, huile.
Huile.
Bon, vous l'avez là.
Huile.
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 Huileux.
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 Huilier.
Huilier.
Ah, vous allez l'avoir.
Dos y dos son cuatro, cuatro y dos son seis y dos son ocho y ocho 16. Y ocho 24 y ocho 32. Vamos para la escuela y también voy yo.
Señor, deseo jugar con la pelota mañana, pero ahora deseo leer la carta de mi amiga favorita. Adiós.
Pancho, ven, ven.
¿Qué tal, amigos? ¿Cómo están ustedes?
Muy bien.
Muy bien. Me alegro. Me alegro. Yo tengo un run run. Sí, este es un run run. Los muchachos y las muchachas de México les gusta jugar con run runes. Sí. Para repasar lo que aprendimos cuando nos reunimos aquí en el patio la vez pasada. Aprendimos cómo decir, ¿desea usted leer un libro? ¿Y desea usted hablar inglés?
Sí.
¿Y desea usted jugar con la pelota?
Sí.
Well, I wonder if you could understand what I said. Perhaps not all of it, but perhaps some of it you did. Well, I did this for a purpose. I want to speak only in Spanish so that you will get an idea of what it's going to be like, say, 50 lessons from now when you and I will be speaking only in Spanish. That's what it'll be like.
Since television is not so much an extension of the visual power as of the tactual and involving power, naturally, therefore, any form of language instruction which calls for much use of sight and sound and touch and taste altogether, ideally favored by television. So people who continue to look at television as if it were a sort of inferior or low-grade movie are missing the complete meaning and opportunity of television.
We need to understand what we mean by a right circular cone. The TV class will use the right circular cone this morning.
The South Carolina Educational Television Center presents Algebra 2 with Mrs. Rhoda Luchenbiel.
today we want to begin a study of a quadratic equation in two variables. The general form of this equation is ax squared plus bxy plus cy squared plus dx plus ey plus f equals 0 if at least one of the coefficients, a, b, or c, is not equal to 0. Now this equation is the curve which results from intersecting a cone with a plane. I want to explain this to you in greater detail, so I want you to look at the geometric solid. Here we have a cone, and the base of this cone is a circle.
A mere visual simulation of classroom conditions is the last thing that television should be used for. And it is mainly being used to simulate classroom conditions of the old-fashioned type. This is it's like, you know, dealing with the motor car as if it were a horseless carriage. And still trying to imagine the horses there. In the first motor cars, there were places for buggy whips and various other equipment. And we are dealing with the new classroom, TV classroom, leaving all room for the vanished horse.
Now look at this test tube. Now in this test tube, I'm going to place water. And in the front of the test tube, I'll place a cork to seal off the opening. Now what do you suppose is going to happen with this cork as I heat the water? Watch carefully.
The natural tendency is to use any new technology for the old purposes. The current uses of television are to simulate the old-fashioned classroom. Not to exploit television, but to make it simulate something that was done earlier, before television. Naturally, therefore, there's a huge wastage of opportunity here. And I really don't have any strong feelings about this, because it's a situation that will tend to correct itself in time, but there's a lot of waste in the meanwhile.
The Japanese place a very high value upon educational opportunity. Hence the sacrifices which parents will make, not only to build schools to provide education for their children, but their willingness, without prejudice of the past, to make use of any tool for learning that becomes available. I saw one school in which the television sets available in all 16 classrooms had been purchased by the sale of trees on the school lot out behind.
それではここでこの楽器を集めまして、もっとも今日はコントラバスは使いませんが、バイオリンが2つ、ビオラ、チェロです。皆さんのよく知っていらっしゃる今は山中という指揮者の次第によるいろいろな弾き方をいたしますから、楽器の音と弾き方についてお聞きください。